So now I'm going to hand things over to Syd Carpenter. Thank you all again for joining us this evening, and thank you to the artists for giving us their time this evening. Syd, I'll let you take over and let me know if you need anything.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank the Clay Arts Center for providing a venue for the exhibition of the work of these significant African-American clay artists. And to contextualize this, to put this in some kind of framework for us to understand why this is critical, I'm going to read from my curator's statement so that you can get a sense of where we are in this moment and where we've come from. So to begin with, the African diaspora has influenced diverse expressions in music, dance, theater, literature, and the visual arts for more than a century in America. There exists a roster of African-American clay artists who have in the past and presently continue to contribute to this breadth of exceptional American cultural expression. From the majestic and poetic works of Dave Drake, an enslaved ceramic artist producing in the 19th century, to Simone Leigh and Theaster Gates, both preeminent clay artists at the pinnacle of contemporary art. African-American clay artists continue to be a consistent presence of innovative and notive clay productivity. From pure abstraction to explicit representations of the experience of being Black in America, the presence of African-American ceramic artists is here, represented at the Clay Arts Center by notable stalwarts who have continued to vigorously enhance the field. Many beginning their careers in the late 60s and early 70s, myself among them, our work reflects the ongoing vibrancy, the technical brilliance, and the creative insight of this generation of ceramic artists. It is my pleasure to present them in this exhibition at the Clay Arts Center. With all that in mind, I recommend that those among you who are students, artists, scholars, curators, and educators include these artists when identifying work that represents compelling content, both expressive and masterfully crafted. So let me introduce you to the artists who have joined us for this discussion. So I'm going to do that by sharing my screen. So the sustaining presence. I should talk a little bit also about the title. The idea that we have these significant artists who have over very long careers been consistent in their productivity. And I will, let's see, I'm going to get you going here. I'm going to start also with some artists that predate some of the folks that are here in the exhibition. And this is the work, or this is an image of William Artist, who was working pretty much in what we would refer to as the Harlem Renaissance. But in his later years, he became a very avid and intense and productive potter. We also need to recall James Tanner, who is still very much active in his production. He has been a professor at Mankato State University in Minnesota, I think now retired, but now just as productive, creating really, really expressive, powerful works as he continues to be one of the stalwarts, but still participating as a contemporary artist. Bing Davis as well. Bing Davis has been working in Dayton, Ohio, where he now, in addition to creating works in his studio, he has his own gallery. So he is able to pay it forward by presenting space and venues for emerging artists. And of course, forgive the blurry slide there, but who cannot acknowledge the contributions of David McDonald, who is a professor emeritus at Syracuse University. His powerful works are in major collections, and he continues to produce these breathtaking works of art. And so these are people that are important also to acknowledge. I could name more, but in terms of contemporary ceramics and what's going on, these are four that I think should be noted. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about Lydia Thompson, who is not on the call right now, but just to show works that are in the exhibition herself. She earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from The Ohio State University and master's degree from Alfred University College of Ceramics. Her awards include a Fulbright grant to conduct research on traditional architecture in Nigeria, and institutional grant for research at the Gudegard International Ceramic Research Center, residency in Denmark. So she has shown internationally, and she continues and is contributing and making powerful work, even as an administrator and as a teacher. So her infusion of energy and expressiveness knows no bounds. She's very, very excited in the work that she's doing. So these are a few of her pieces.
Syd, I'm just going to cut across you there and let you know that Lydia did actually manage to join us, and she is on the panel. So.
Oh, great. Okay, all right. Okay. No account of African-American ceramics could be complete without the contributions of Winnie Owens-Hart. I feel as if anything that I say about her will not do her justice. But briefly, I can say that currently she has been awarded several grants, fellowships. Her work in Nigeria and traditional African pottery villages is something that is phenomenal in its ability to document from the point of view of African-American, or at least persons of color, in terms of their contributions to this field. So this is one of the pieces that she is presently showing. Could you give us the title on this one, Winnie?
Adorn One.
Adorn One. Is this part of a larger series?
Yeah, it's about vaginal mutilation in the world. The things that happen to women that are just bone chilling. Mm-hmm. And this work rocks. All of these from the series, they rock. And I talk about why women rock. Women rock when they're soothing their children. Women rock when they're crying and upset, and women rock in grief.
Thank you. The next artist who we are so fortunate to be able to include is Earline Green. Earline received her Master of Fine Arts Ceramics degree in 1996 from the Texas Women's University in Denton, Texas. She also received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Advertising Design from Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, Tennessee. She has been a professor emeritus since 2022, so recently retired from Tarrant County College South Campus and Studios, and she is a studio ceramic artist. At this point, she is producing as a retired person newly in her studio, producing these works. As you can see, this series of cloths. If you wanted to talk a little bit about those, Earline, that would be great to just tell us a little bit about their content. We can't hear you. Audio.
Greetings, everyone. This is Earline. The images that you're seeing now are called Rose to Arlen, 6 generations of needlework makers in my family. And it is a conversation from grandmothers to granddaughters. And each of the pieces are, well, let's see, there are 3 pieces that are from actual fabrics that were made by the grandmothers, and the granddaughters' faces are impressed on the bulky section. And this started with a conversation about things women tie in handkerchiefs and put in their bosoms. So it's a conversation about grandmothers and granddaughters and being held precious to the grandmother by placing that granddaughter close to their heart.
That's amazing to me because as you were saying this, I was visualizing my grandmother and my aunts tucking those things into their bras and how those were special, safe places. So thank you for that, because to give imagery to that, it just, I don't know, it takes me back. It's just one of those memories that is embedded in my identity as a Black woman. I mean, I'm sure other women tuck things in their bra, but I remember my granny and my aunts and my mom doing that. So thank you for that imagery.
You're welcome.
Let's go on. This is a different image. Could you talk a little bit about this bottle?
The bottle is from the 2018 Faculty Development Leave. I was awarded the opportunity to research enslaved potters in Texas. So I started with the H. Wilson and Company because they're believed to be the first Black business owners in the state of Texas.
Okay, so a little history on that. So there's an eclectic sensibility to the things that you identify, broader history and personal history.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to read from Bobby Scroggins' biographical statement. I'll go through the slides because you can get a sense of the exquisite visual that his work provides and his mastery of manipulating this material. There's a kind of formalism, but at the same time, there is this sense of play, elegance, ceremony. When I first saw these, I had to literally shut my mouth because these were so beautiful. Thank you, Bobby. So if you want to talk a little bit about what this series is about, that would be great.
Oh, and thank you for having me on. Yes, this series, the Fertility Vessel series, has been going on for several years. Actually, I started the series back in the early 90s, and I've revisited it from time to time. But these works are about celebrating the concept of fertility, which I define that as an original and continuous manifestation of divine thought. You know, it goes beyond our physical ability to procreate or to grow crops or whatever it is, but it's a celebration of us living in being citizens of a fertile and expanding universe.
They are lush. They are.
Thank you. And so these protrusions that are on each one of these pots basically represent seeds, but they were called seeds of thought. Yeah.
And just for reference, what's the scale on these?
Okay, this one, the one we're looking at now, is probably about 24 inches tall.
Mm-hmm.
The rust colored one is about 18 by 18 square, 18 inches. And the turquoise one is the height of which is I think about 11 to 12 inches, something like that. So they vary in size. There are some that are even larger than these, and there's some that are quite smaller. But they all vary the or the same theme of, just celebrating fertility.
So your resume includes receiving many grants, purchase awards, residencies. He has been a visiting artist at the Sanbao International Ceramic Art Institute in Zhengzhou, China. He was a featured visiting artist at the Shanghai University while there. I'm continuing to read. The sculptures were on permanent display at the Aviation Museum of Kentucky for several years. Most recently, he has been a featured artist at the World Stove International Wood Fire Conference in Sacramento, California. That must be exciting. And I can just see these words as wood-fired objects. Yum. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to Sanamu Sasama, who could not be with us this evening, is someone, once again, that you should know about. Her work has dealt with so many different issues that have to do with women. Once again, female mutilation has been an issue for her. She is also very much involved with working with child sex workers in Cambodia. She just returned from a trip there. So, represented in this exhibition is this bird bowl and her green flower pot. But she is someone that you should definitely look up and research, because the breadth of her vision as an artist and the breadth of her engagement on so many levels that have to do with social justice. She is a full package of creativity, and she just is one of these women who puts herself out there, self-sacrificing, but at the same time engaged in the most important issues of the day. Sanamu Sasama, she has been a friend of mine for more than practically my entire adult life. And I am always astonished and humbled by what this woman does in the name of making art and in the name of service to others. And here we have the work of someone who I have admired and just been so engaged with looking at what they do, not only in terms of imagery and content, but in terms of just the sheer virtuosity of the work. And that is Malcolm Mobutu Smith. Malcolm is Associate Professor of Ceramic Art and Director of Graduate Studies in the Sydney and Lois Eskenazi School of Art and Architecture and Design at Indiana University in Bloomington. He earned his MFA degree from New York College of Ceramics at Alfred University in 1996, received a BFA in ceramics in 1994. Smith's professional activities include workshops, lectures, residency. He's represented by the Wexler Gallery, and he is in numerous private and public collections, including the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, the New Taipei City Yingye Ceramics Museum, the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art, and Indiana State Museum. You will notice that I am not reading a lot of these CVs because the length and depth of all of these artists' work and experiences and careers would be too overwhelming, but note that it's all noted exposures and exhibitions. These are artists who have been very much embedded in this narrative of contemporary ceramic art. So, Malcolm, what is this?
So this is from a recent body of work that just had a solo exhibition at the Hunterdon Art Museum in New Jersey, featuring a lot of challenging images, reckoning with our current socio-political conundrum of a very, very divided country, and the fact that decades old, hundreds of years old issues of race politics are still fractious and right on the surface. And so I felt the need to dip my toe into, in the last 10, 12 years, turning my work's attention to wrestling directly with some of these painful issues. So what you have on the front of this piece is Little Tuffy, who's a character created by my mother in 1971, who is actually the representation of myself and my brother Jason, because she knew that she was having children of color and there was nothing on the store shelves that reflected us in popular media. And so she endeavored to make a coloring book that represented Blackness. And ironically, this is a white woman married to a Black man creating this. And so Little Tuffy is my power figure here, but unfortunately he's being silenced or killed by hypothetically police violence. The backside of this is designed with a target and a blue line. And I think that's relatively self-explanatory.
Is that on, no, that's.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, yeah, totally powerful. And what, okay, I can see the scale on these. So these have a presence.
Yeah, they're about 20 inches tall, 20 inches wide.
Mhm. Yeah. What I really notice about these, I'm aware of your cups that you have been doing, which are these, to me, these animated, their personalities. And that's one of the things that I always take from your work, is that each object is an individual with secrets, with insights, with challenges, and that when you look at them, there's always a question. There's always a question. So
I'm wrestling with that right now, Syd, because I've got 20 of them sitting on my shelves and I can't answer the mystery yet.
yeah, well, you just keep making them, because it seems that you have this way of embedding these kind of insights, and well, insights is a little bit too graceful. I think that you embed these remarks in your pieces. There's always something that is saying, yeah, but, you know, they have that kind of muscular feeling to them, playfulness, irony. So, you know, I appreciate that kind of layering that you get out of a ceramic piece. I mean, it's always, to me, I'm looking at your pieces and thinking about not just the humor of it, but the idea of the court jester, who's the only one who doesn't get his head cut off when he tells the truth.
Mm.
And so it really, you know, liking the potential of these as presenting themselves as these toys, possibly, playful, organic, maybe natural, but you know, there's always that input of, you know, that kind of hip hop sensibility, comic books, all of that stuff where truths were told, but truths were told in this protected space. And so
it's also a language of convention that we've been acculturated to know how to read and negotiate naturally in our contemporary society. So that vocabulary is mine, both the hip hop vocabulary, but also just the more universal language of comic book illustration is important. But I'm just trying to live up to and maintain the standards that all of my elite friends here and peers and mentors have done for me. So you guys set the standard. I've always been a student of everyone in this meeting and many, many more.
Well, your voice in this conversation is always one to take note of. You know, what's Malcolm going to say? What's Winnie going to say? It's that conversation that continues, that keeps, I guess, if I can use my own phrase, a sustaining presence, because we speak, we tell our truths, and that's what this is about. So I don't know if Lydia, what am I doing? If Lydia is on, is Lydia here? Can she talk? Lydia?
I'm here, Syd. Can you see me?
I can't see you. I see a kind of a print, an emblematic design, but can you see the screen?
Yeah, I can see everybody.
Okay, so let's talk. Let's see. Hello
to everybody.
Hello to you, Lydia.
I'll read a little bit about her current work. Well, Lydia earned her BFA from the Ohio State University and MFA from the New York College of Ceramics at Alfred. Her awards include a Fulbright Hayes grant. And yeah, I think I did. I read a lot of that already. Her work is in private and public collections in Ohio, Mississippi, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Virginia, New Zealand, Austria, Switzerland, and Italy. She has conducted workshops for youths and adults, given public lectures, and served as juror and curator for national and regional exhibitions. Is there anything else I should add to that?
No, other than I'm a professor of art at UNC Charlotte in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, so that's where she is.
Yeah.
So, if you could talk about this, I'm assuming this is your latest series that is in.
Yeah, thank you, Syd. Thanks, everybody. And Syd, thanks for giving me an opportunity I signed in late. So thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak about my work. This is a series that's based on, build homes and residents that are in these urban environments that have kind of aged over the years. They're dilapidated buildings. And these were homes. These were where people lived. And these are kind of some things that have been left behind. So, we had the whole migration from the South going to the North. And this is kind of what's happening after generation has lived in these homes and what has happened over a period of time. So they're just as we age as humans, buildings have the same kind of personality that when they're not giving love and attention, that they start to fall apart as well. So it's capturing some of those elements in the work, exposing not having roofs on these so you can actually see what's going on. Several ethnic groups and people, working class people who have been living in these sorts of environments and things starting to break down. I also see these little figurines that I've inherited actually from my grandmother. They were fused into these homes because I think and this is one of the questions that you asked us to respond to about ceramics, but I do think it was in terms of the nurturing, the understanding of a ceramic form. I think it started at a very early age with seeing these things throughout my grandmother's house. So, including these in the conversation is not necessarily talking about Eurocentric communities and culture, but it's more or less talking about how those influences of seeing these objects made their way into my grandmother's house. So this is just a process of showing how things start to deteriorate and start to fall apart.
I have found these so moving because I looked up more of them, obviously, on the internet, and just saw each one once again telling this story. There is this narrative going on. We recognize the iconic figure, the iconic shape of the house, and then all of the markings, the scripts, the things going on inside, the detritus going on inside. And it is an amazing representation of not only the life of an object, but what we can experience ourselves in that. One of the things that, of course, that comes across to me in looking at this work is that they are still standing, despite the wounds that are apparent, despite the sense that there's an impending collapse, but not so. So your use of clay, your use of marking, all of these things just lend power to these objects and invite conversation and observation. So I think that there's in some ways this whole idea of habitation, which is one of the words that comes up when I look at this work, is the nature of habitation. Often we see the idealized form of the house representing security, domesticity, and all of these things. But if we were to peel back the skin of the coverings, what actually is happening in that inner space that's happening inside of those interiors. So I love the kind of stripped down, exposed way that you describe the possibility of what is actually going on and what did go on and what will go on. So I thank you a lot for making this body of work. It just, to me, is some of the most powerful work that I have seen you do, even though every time you do a body of work, it's so moving, but they keep getting better and better and more powerful. So thank you so much for that. So with that, I thought that we could, I'm going to unshare this. Okay, go back. I thought that we could begin by answering some of these questions. I'm not quite, we're at 7:35, so I think we probably have about 20 minutes or so. Is that true? Is Regina still on?
Yes, I'm here. Yep, that's fine. We've got plenty of time.
Okay, we're good. So just some basics. I want to know from all of you, what brought you to clay? Why clay? Anybody can jump in.
You know, I started, I grew up in a place called Falls Church, Virginia. And I grew up in an age where everything was segregated. And our community, our Black community, was, of course, encircled by the whites. And, you know, we had our own school, which is still standing up the street from me now. And we had, it was a different situation. Everybody looked out for everybody. If there was a problem, you know, it would be solved by the elders, basically. So when it came to school, my parents had a certain expectation, but at the same time, I can't remember when I wasn't doing clay. My mother and father brought me clay. You know, it's, you know, when I read these things, you know, I said, well, the first two answers have to be my parents. And this was a time, as time went on, and the schools integrated. My first integrated class, I was in the 7th grade, and there was a wheel and clay for me. And when it was time for me to roll over into high school, there was a wheel and clay for me, because the junior high school teacher told the high school teacher, there's this girl who's just, you know, crazy about clay. And my parents' position was this. I have an older brother and sister, 6 years older, 3 years older. Everybody did art in our community, like our cousin did the murals on the church, and he played classical violin. And I found out that he went to the Peabody in Baltimore when it was segregated. And of course, he couldn't stay because of his color and his money, but it was an amazing thing that my parents in that age said to us, let them do what they love the best and they'll do it well. And years passed, and my mother, I used to ask my mother, you know, what was I put here for? You know, and I thought it was to be a teacher, because I did enjoy teaching, and I enjoyed teaching clay. But after working as a teacher, you know, I was also doing my work. I don't even remember how I could do as much as I did in a year or a couple of years. But one day my mom came to me. Now I had earned a fellowship with the Smithsonian, a faculty fellowship, and then they gave me I was one of the first 2 or 4 Renwick Scholars Fellows. And that was when I began actually in the 70s, I began my research on the history of African-American ceramicists, because I knew that they were there. There's a thing I always say about Encyclopedia A. Before we went to school, and I didn't go to one of those little kindergartens, but my mother would take the encyclopedias off the shelf, and, you know, they had the number and the alphabet, and the first one that would go back would be A and a 1. And I'd open the book, and there were these pictures from the continent, and they were lush, and, you know, and then I saw this huge pot, and I never forgot it. And when I ended up in Nigeria on our way from Ife to Abuja, I saw this big pot, and I, stupidly, when you're 20s, you do stupid things. I dashed out of the Volkswagen Bug that we were traveling, from north to south, and ran toward this, enclosed compound. And there was what it turned out to be all my life. It was a granary, but in my child's head, it was this pot, and I had been looking for that pot for the rest of my life until that day.
Wow, that's a story. It's interesting because I've heard several stories from other artists who have been summoned, if you will, by images of Black people making art, and they go to find that person. I'm thinking of Sana, why she went towards Africa and India. I'm thinking of Mapo, who's down in New Orleans, Mapo Kennard Payton, who started going to Africa because she saw an image of a woman making a pot in a book. And the woman was looking out at her, and Mapo imagined that the woman was saying, "Come here." Mapo went looking for the woman. That got her to Africa. That got her there. And because of that, I went with her, not on that first trip, but it was just this whole idea of being summoned by images of our people making. And that's our first contact. Anyone else want to talk about there's Lydia. Hi, Lydia. So, Lydia, now that I have you,
Okay.
how did you start working with clay? Why? Your sound went off. Your audio's gone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Hear
Okay, sorry. I think for me, it was really watching my grandparents use their hands a lot. They weren't really doing clay, but my grandmother, she had a huge vegetable garden, and I would go out and work with her in the garden, mostly picking the corn, which nobody wanted to do because, you get all the stickers and sticklers and stuff on there from the corn, the leaves. But I watched my grandmother make quilts, and then my mother got me started crocheting at a very early age. So I think for me, it was a way that I could continue working with my hands. So we went to art school at a very early age on Saturdays at the Columbus College of Art and Design. And, my mother she was a single parent, but she knew this was a good way to keep her children active, keep them out of trouble, to keep them busy. And all of us naturally gravitated towards the arts. And I think my grandfather worked in wood a lot. And I think it was just that initial class. By the time I got to high school, I was doing a little bit of ceramics in high school, but by the time I got to college and I really took that first ceramic class, that's when everything opened up for me. And that's when I would see articles on Winnie Owens-Hart, and I would see articles on David McDonald, and see some of the work from Bing Davis. Of course, Ceramics Monthly, the cover of Ceramics Monthly was in color, but everything inside of it was black and white. But that, just to see the way they were using clay, I was naturally attracted to that. So, I wasn't the one that was playing with mud pies. It's just that me seeing my grandparents and my parents working with their hands all the time, it was really the craft that I was more interested in, and not so much ceramics. But once I touched ceramics, I said, this is what I want to be married to for the rest of my life.
Earline, what got you going? Can't hear you. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
I'm just listening and I'm getting
Oh,
all caught up in what I'm hearing. And okay, well, my aha moment in ceramics is not nearly as exotic as some of the experiences you all have had. It actually started when I was teaching in middle school back in the early 90s. And I attended a workshop by a very well-known potter by the name of Randy Broadnax. Now, Randy was more of a showman than he was anything else, but it was just something about the way he communicated his love for ceramics that really got me interested. At that time, I was in graduate school and I started taking clay classes again and decided to change my degree plan from a master's in education to a master's in fine arts. And that was the beginning of that.
mm, mm, okay. Gentlemen,
Okay, I'll jump in.
okay, thank you.
Okay, as I go back in my history, there are a few events that led to the chain of events that led to my participation, my lifestyle in making art and working with clay. First one was being a very small child. It's funny how we always have this thing in common about encyclopedias, because my parents also had a set of encyclopedias where I, one day, and I know it's before I started school, and I was a very curious kid and reached and got an encyclopedia off the shelf and was looking through the pages, and I saw a photograph of a very famous sculpture. And coincidentally, there was a pink crayon laying on the floor. So I started trying to draw this, what I saw in the book, which in a lot of ways would have been defacing a book. Well, my mother comes in and she sees me doing this. And instead of scolding me, she says, "Whoa, you're going to be a great artist one of these days." And she takes the crayon and gives me a box of crayons, and of course takes a book from me, but gives me some paper and said, "Now, here, sit down and draw as much as you want." So that was one of the first things that I think is very important in terms of nurturing, parental nurturing that gives us permission to be creative. And that was a very, very important memory in my life. The first time I touched clay was the second grade, and just there was something about it when they gave us clay to make these pieces of sculpture. I was supposed to do an animal, of course. No, I didn't, and I just wanted to sculpt this little man, and so I did that, and I was just fascinated with it. And although I was not following the rules, the teacher scolded me at first for not following the rules, but later on, I think she realized that, she needed to give me some praise after the pieces came back and they looked really good. But now the third one, most important experience, came after a serious accident that I had, where I was trying to do gymnastics at about the age of 13 and doing the pommel horse and wasn't very good at it. So I wound up coming down on a wooden floor head first, which created severe injury. I wound up having what they call a subdural hematoma, which had not been detected immediately. There's a long story associated with that, but wound up having that brain surgery because of this accident. And during that convalescent period of time, I really lost control of my hands, body function, stuff like that. I was really, really in bad shape and missed most of that school year, being hospitalized or being convalescent. Well, I remembered how my mother would bring us clay to play with. And this was before the advent of art therapy, So, the doctors just said, well, here's a rubber ball, just squeeze that, to get the strength back in your hands. But she brought me this clay to the hospital bed. And I started working with the clay to get the feeling back into my hands. And as time went on, the feeling came back, and coincidentally, had more time to not just manipulate this clay, but actually start creating these little sculptures with it. And it was really an amazing situation. Whereas when I went into the hospital, I was questioned about whether I would even come out okay. But as I left that hospital, I was creating these really, really interesting sculptures. And within a year's time, I was like showing in galleries and doing all kinds of amazing things with clay. So I always associated clay as a healing medium, as something that I always, it helped to maintain my healing and my return to normalcy. And, I've always associated with equilibrium, gaining that back, recovery.
I love that word, equilibrium, that clay provides equilibrium.
Yeah. So it's a healing medium for me. And it's not just something that is limited to an academic pursuit. It's a very spiritual type of endeavor that, working with clay to me is a form of prayer. And of course,
All right.
about the fertility vessels, of course, said obviously about that.
Thank you. Thank you. That's an amazing story. Malcolm.
Guess it's my turn. So I have to say I'm fortunate to be the offspring of two artist parents who met at Michigan State University in the art program, one getting a degree in sculpture and my mother getting a degree in painting. And so I grew up steeped in artworks and spaces in the house all around us. My mother even had a pottery wheel when I was very young, but they would routinely take us to the Kresge Art Gallery on Michigan State's campus in East Lansing. And I can distinctly remember being eye to the level of a pedestal and seeing pots sort of above eye level, highlighted by a spotlight, and knowing implicitly that a human being had made that because I had some awareness that my mother had made the pots that were in our house. And so I connected the agency of my own body and my own development as a person as I grew up, that I could make that someday. And so that's my earliest memory of like deciding that I wanted to have an object on a pedestal, similar to whatever those works were back when I was 5 years old. But I always sort of identified myself as a potential artist maker. I went through phases of wanting to be in competitions with my mother to be a painter or drawer, to be a comic artist, to be a mathematician. I wanted to be a doctor for a while, but later I was also fortunate enough to go to a high school in the suburbs of Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, that had a teacher who was deeply connected to the art world and the ceramic world, Paul Bernhardt. And at that point in time, age 14, I told myself that I wanted to be a clay artist and a teacher. And I sort of laid out my roadmap of how to do both of those things. And it all meant, long hours practicing so that I could be good enough to have a portfolio that would get me entry to the places that I wanted to be. I had good mentors. I had all of you as psychic and personal friends as I developed. I met many folks like James Watkins and Winnie way back when I was a teenager, and it's been fruitful and beautiful ever since. And I'm always trying to strive for improvement, and I'm endlessly curious. So that pretty much fuels my method of teaching and my method of exploring in my studio, is that I'm always hungry for more.
I have these other questions that have to do with you as artists and your teaching, but I wanted to delve into this whole issue of being African-American artists in a field that has seen so few of us in preeminent, prominent spaces. And there are Winnie and James Tanner and David McDonald and others who have achieved that certain kind of preeminence and notability. But I'm curious about what you see the atmosphere is in terms of the ceramic world and its relationship to African-American artists. What has changed? Have you seen any change? Is there reason for change? I'm just curious about your experience as African-American artists in a field that is predominantly Caucasian and Asian.
I'd like to talk about history. I was with NCECA when it was Supermud or something.
Right. Well, they were two different things. Supermud was a different conference.
Yeah. But I'll just stick with NCECA because I was at both places.
Mhm.
But I remember there were three of us, James Tanner, James Watkins, and me. Then Bobby, I'm trying to think of, oh God, and David. And we would go to the conferences and that was it. It was just us for a long, long time. And I think it's only been recently, and I don't know what the change is, to be very honest with you. I remember meeting Mr. Mobutu when he was 15. And we were doing, it was David, oh Jesus, Yvonne Tucker. I'm trying to think of the older people. I put a panel together, and the room was packed. The room was packed, and each one of us told a story of in relationship to NCECA, basically, because that was the gathering place for ceramicists. I don't know how it changed. I know that when I went to the conference and I started to see young African Americans at the conference, they would try not to look me in the eye. So I would step in front of them and introduce myself because I just thought it was important to make that kind of contact. And I guess somewhere I started gathering information about ceramic artists at a conference in Tennessee that Bing Davis helped put together. And that's going back to the late 60s, early 70s. And I can't tell you why. I have about 40 boxes now that I'm going through because I'm trying to write the history of African-American ceramicists from the 18th to the 20th century. And what I realized, I had some people to come in the house and help me open these boxes and put things in the right place. And I just realized I don't know why I started that sojourn, because that's what it has been. And happy to do it. You know, hopefully I can get it done before I can't remember too much. But it's just very interesting how people are connected in NCECA. You know, I don't think I know everybody in this venue today and a whole lot more. I'm happy to see it. You know, I hope it continues because it seems like the way things are going, we'll become invisible again, but I doubt it. I don't think that will be allowed.
I'm curious, I don't know what my colleagues' experiences have been, but in my 27 years of teaching, I've had a scant 3 ceramic majors in any form whatsoever, whether it's undergrad or grad, and I've only had 1 graduate student of color. How have your experiences been, and what does that say for the future of people of color in clay?
I think we've all had a similar experience there in terms of the numbers. The majority of the students that I've taught at the University of Kentucky, the vast majority have been students of other races, Caucasian, Asian, different nationalities. I've had very few. However, I can say I've been very fortunate in have been a mentor to some of those up and coming artists that are, you know, taking the stage now and gaining a lot of attention. So, you know, that's, I think I don't know just how things are changing, if they're changing rapidly, but I do think that there is some importance in that now there are those of us who are still on the scene who these young artists can look up to. Because, you know, when I started making clay, there are very few people that I could look to as a role model, you know, to emulate in clay, you know. There was always people that you could look to in other fields of music or literature or sports or all that kind of thing, but there were very few. So I think, you know, what's really appropriate about this conversation is when we're talking about the sustaining presence. And I think that we are seed planters, and, you know, the concept of planting seeds, it takes a while before they, you know, those seeds come to fruition. So we may not see this, but I believe that, you know, that the field is going to prosper in ways that we are yet to see. I'm hopeful of that.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. Oh, I'm sorry, Syd. I was just saying that from my point of view, because I spent, you know, my time in higher education in both as a faculty member, but also as an arts administrator, where I've had to recruit students for art departments ever since 1985. And I know that just in general, unless you're at these feeder undergraduate programs like Kansas City Art Institute, you're not going to find that there's going to be a lot of ceramic students in general. But us being in the art department and us having visibility and the students seeing us, they may not come to it right away. They may find ceramics a little later on down the line. And it does have to do with them seeing themselves in a field that they're going to be able to get a job. And I think that's most students. But I think what's happening now is, I think they are very passionate about it, and we've stayed the course. All of us have stayed the course, and they see that. There has been a change I see in the organization in SECA. I mean, having students, African-American students, come up to me and tell me I'm their clay buddy or whatever it is. But I think it is a slow and long process. And I will say that, you know, just seeing Syd there all the time, Syd was mysterious to me. She was this incredible petite woman, but she had this powerful work. I mean, some of her work is 5 feet long. I mean, it's amazing work. And it's the volume is I mean, when you see the work, the volume is vast. And you're thinking, this artist is making these large forms. That's impressive. And then who's filling a suitcase and going over to West Africa? I mean, there was no internet back then. And these are like trailblazers who are doing these things. But fortunately, I have 3 African-American majors in ceramics, and I'm just like, I know, and it's amazing. But I do think it's gradual, but I just like the fact that they're in my classes. So I have 5 African-American students in my class of 16. And that is probably where I am in the United States. I'm in the Mid-Atlantic. I'm in North Carolina, which our African-American population is somewhere around 20% at our university. So it definitely makes a difference, because I'm seeing students from other majors too. And that's what they do. They get into your class and then they feel that energy, and then they want to be part of that. Even if they are almost done with their program, we still try to encourage and take them to NCECA, that this is a lifestyle too. Even though you may be a graphic designer, you can still pursue ceramics in some capacity.
And don't forget about the historically Black colleges, because you know, that's been a road to NCECA. I mean, they used to sleep on the floor because we could only afford 1 room, you know. But or they would get the scholarship to go to Penland and say how life-changing it was. So that's another feeder group. And I just think and I'm directing this to Malcolm. Malcolm, you know, I just think you and your peer group are, I mean, it's like wonderful. It's like seeing my son again. And I think about, because he sends me his images that he's working on, and I really appreciate it. So there's no gap to me between us at this time. But yeah, it's gotten better.
I also want to point out, in the greater art world, the so-called fine art world, that two of the most preeminent artists, Simone Leigh and Theaster Gates, are clay artists. They make pots. And one of them, Simone, she just won the prize at the Venice Biennale. Theaster Gates is always demonstrating his affiliation and his history with clay. So one of the things that has been very apparent to me is this kind of notion of the art star. So many of young people go into this and are attracted to what they consider to be the glamour of it and the possibility of it. And I think probably possibility is maybe the best word. To have someone like Simone Leigh, who's come up through undergraduate programs, and you have Theaster Gates, who also, you know, you see his early pots, and he's making Japanese tea bowls, that kind of thing, and where this has grown and where it can take you. So the idea of the seed itself is not lost upon them. I think that those who are creatives see the possibility of it. And so that's where I see the change, is the idea that you can be an artist. You know, it's like the NBA. How many of these aspiring basketball players are going to get to the NBA? But still, there is that sense of wanting to be, and I could be, because they see us, and then they see Theaster, and then they see Simone, and any number of other people. I am, in going to NCECA in the last couple of years, I have been actually encouraged by seeing all of these Black students, I'm assuming they're students, walking around, lots of them, and I don't know who they are. Like, who's that? So I find myself walking up to them to just say, yeah, like, what, who? Yeah, because I am so delighted by their presence, and that they want to get involved. I think some of them want to get involved. Gerald Brown is going to do something. I don't know if you know Gerald.
Oh, yes.
My girl. Okay, so I am encouraged. I think that our presence is established. We are sustaining presence. And so I just think that we are a seed. There's that old saying that they tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. So here we are, and we're doing it. We're sprouting up like weeds. I mean, you have people like Kevin Snipes, and there are a number of people that are making their mark as established African-American ceramic artists, making amazing work that goes without saying. I mean, I wish my memory was better because I could tick off these names of these people, but I am encouraged because like Winnie and James and all of these other folks, this few number of folks who started going to those conferences. I went to a few of those super muds, and who was there? Winnie. You know, I don't even know if you saw me, Winnie. I was
No. I was looking for people of color. That's why I did the same thing you did. I'd step in front. They try to not see me, and I'm going like, hello.
Yeah, hello. Yeah. And now people walk up to me, kids, African-American kids walk up to me and say, "You're Syd Carpenter." Yep.
They're doing their research. They got to know the history. That's
Oh,
one of the
yeah.
things we do in our community is we preach history.
Right, right. And so I get the impression that somebody is teaching us.
Well, yeah, the other thing too is it's good for African-American ceramic artists to be in the school system, to be not only in K through 12, but community colleges and at universities, all kinds of universities, because all students need to be exposed to African-American ceramic artists and all of you that are here, you all get included in my presentations, depending on what project we're working on. But that's all artists, because I feel like as an educator, I'm preparing my students for the future, and the future looks like a rainbow. It doesn't look like there's just one or two African-American students. It's going to be more populated with students of color. And we need to talk about that, and we need to compare those works together. One thing that I will say, Syd and everybody, is that it has been nice to see that exhibitions are not just focused on, ethnicity or race or that, but that, I'm seeing you and others, Winnie, Bobby, all of you, Malcolm, I'm seeing your work in all kinds of shows, because we're talking about there's other things that our work is dealing with besides who we are as African Americans. And our work might not even look African. I mean, I don't even know what that looks like anymore when we're in those categories. But it happens, but I think that was one way to contextualize. And I do appreciate you doing this, Syd, curating this show, because it does kind of contextualize the conversation and the work and the way it's made and why it's made.
Yeah, I think, I agree with everything you say, because it is about being artists. Our heritage certainly is critical to what our narrative is going to be. You draw upon experience, but that does not limit what you observe and what you react to. As artists, as visual people, we react to everything. And so that has to be and can be and is expressed in the work that we do. I mean, it's the idea of having language, having freedom of visual language. And so I think contemporary students now, the students that are working now, they get that. They really get that. They're making exciting work from what I can see, and owning where they are. I know it's still hard. I mean, if you're going to be the only Black student in a school, you're gonna feel that. That's going to be profound. But at the same time, being encouraged by seeing us, having access to our visibility. We're visible. We remain visible. We've had long careers in this in different capacities, as teachers, as just freelance artists, just making stuff. And that's the possibility. And so with that said, I think maybe we have 15 minutes and maybe there are questions. Is that true, Regina?
Yes, we do have a couple of questions. Actually, we have more than a couple, but let's see. From Avery.
Are we going to 8:30?
We can stay on for another few minutes. We're at almost 8:15. Avery said, thank you all so much for sharing your work with us. Arlene, I was wondering if you could speak more on the relationship between fabric and clay that you explore in your work. And Avery is one of our current artists in residence at Clay Art Center.
Okay, the relationship between clay and fabric is my forms were inspired by my grandmothers who were quilters, and it's my way of honoring their memory and also celebrating the life of other unheralded ceramic artists and leaders in the community.
Thank you so much, Arlene. This is a question, it's a general question. It's from Mara. Wondering if people who are doing more sculpture work started with functional ware, or have they always used clay in a more sculptural form?
I started out throwing on the wheel, trying to be a perfectionist. I went to the Philadelphia College of Art, and Bill Daly used to be one of our instructors. And so back in the 60s, $5 was a lot of money. So we had a contest. You'd get 2 pounds of clay, and the person who could throw the largest cylinder would get the $5. And of course, it was always the guys, you know, muscling. I started doing both. I started altering the Adorn #1 is a throne piece that's altered. So the message is more important to me, and I work out the technique as I go, or the technical stuff as I go.
I started out as a sculptor, and I still see myself as that. As far as pottery is concerned, I'm self-taught. I didn't even major in ceramics, but you know, one of the things I found is a gift of being able to learn how to, you know, train myself to do the things that I do in ceramics. So you know, my approach, kind of like what Winnie's saying, is that, you know, the idea is the important thing, and then of course the medium, that's most appropriate to take that idea into a physical reality is the thing that I would do. So clay just tended to be the material that I could use not only as a product material, but as a process material as a sculptor. So
I practiced hard to have virtuosity with the thing, so that meant mastering the wheel. But I've never really spent any real time as a utilitarian maker, but I'm passionate about the vocabulary of utilitarian vessels as a language of sculpture, and I pivot off of that to make my abstract vessels. But yeah, I wanted to master the wheel, and so I would go to my gymnastics practice, and the building would still be open. I go back down to the ceramic room, and they'd lock the interior door, and I'd leave through the window at 7 p.m. at night, you know, every single day, trying to improve what I couldn't do during the day. So, you know, learning the wheel, learning how to hand build, and being virtuosic at it has been always the drive.
Yeah, I think I took my first wheel class, and I was so frustrated that I decided I'm just going to throw 100 cylinders until I get this down. And so that's how I learned how to throw on the wheel. And I use the wheel occasionally. I respect the wheel. I have taught wheel throwing, and I think any of us, if you're going into teaching, you have to be able to teach at least a beginning hand-built wheel throwing class. And so I have enough skill to do a few tricks. And I respect potters. I mean, my students would always say, "So what do you do with your demos?" I was like, "I put them in the trash," is where I recycle them. I'm not, you know, I don't want anybody to think I'm a potter, because, you know, we have master potters out there, but I respect it. I love talking about it. I want our students to understand that when you're making functional ware, utilitarian ware, you're actually making it for somebody else. Sometimes they'll make a really big handle and say, "Oh, I wanted the handle that way." It's like, yeah, but does that handle really make sense? Does it really work with the hand? So just understanding the basic principles of wheel is really important to me, and it's true. Once you learn it, you never forget. It's like riding a bike. You never forget how to throw on the potter's wheel.
I identify as a ceramic artist, so I don't have to choose between sculpture and pottery. I think that I'm pretty decent with throwing. I've taught throwing for years at an art center as well as at Tarrant County College, but my heart is with sculpture. I love building. I love using the wheel as a tool to build my sculptures.
yeah, I think it's important to make that distinction that the wheel is a tool, not ceramics in and of itself. you know, and, you know, I teach the wheel, I throw as a potter, as a sculptor. But yeah, it's important to make sure that there's a distinction there, because ceramics, the field of ceramics is so vast. And, you know, I tell my students, you know, the majority of people who work in ceramics are not even artists. They're scientists, they're engineers, they're people in construction and that kind of thing. So we're the smallest part of, you know, the ceramics, general ceramics community. So,
But the noisiest.
yeah, we're the most fun, for sure.
Good point, yeah. So, I think, you know, I could just briefly describe my experience, and it basically encompasses all of what you guys have said. I think of my work as more sculptural than functional, even though I've started this series of farm bowls, but the bowl almost as a metaphor, but still always thinking about it as a vessel in a container, and just delving into that area, that way of observation. That's why I'm making bowls, because I think they represent so much more than, you know, the functional simple thing. Even though unlike some of you, when I do a demo, I keep that pot and I fire it up, and my closet is filled with demo pots. and because I love them, I love talking about pots, I love handling them. I'm always trading or buying and getting pots. And, you know, when I present food and have parties, I like to bring out the pots, you know, because that to me is this other, I mean, it's this experience. It's a way of engaging in an object in this very, very sensual way. So I love pots, but I went through the quote unquote the vessel aesthetic thing that was happening in the 80s and 90s, and where pots were vessels now. Somebody said, what's the difference between a pot and a vessel? $5,000.
Couple of zeros. Couple of zeros.
A couple of zeros. So I just think that, you know, it depends on where your sensibilities are, but I teach a class, or I did, called Container as Architecture. And we looked at the architecture of mugs and how it related to a new science building that was being built right outside the window. You know, what did this mug and that architectural monstrosity have in common? And there was a lot: interior, exterior, surface, handling, usability, all of this stuff. So start somewhere. That mug's a good place to start if you want to become an architect.
Thank you so much, Syd. I think that we are almost coming to an end here. I do want to let people know that next year, Clay Arts Centre will host a solo exhibition by Lydia Thompson. We're super excited to have Lydia with us next year. And also that we do have in our virtual library, we do have talks by Syd, by Lydia, and by Sana Musasama. So if you have some time, maybe go on the virtual library and catch up with those recorded talks. They're excellent. Thank you all for your time tonight. Thank you to our panel for making time for us this evening. Thank you, Syd, for all your hard work, both on the exhibition and on this evening's panel. And thank you to our audience for joining us, and we'll see you back here at Clay Arts Centre another evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Night.
you.
Well,
Bye.
thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you so much.